Before the city hummed with life, before the cars swarmed the streets and the heat of Lagos intensified, Michael Owolabi was already moving, his thoughts as fast as his feet. The air was thick with moisture from the early morning rain, but his mind was far from the dampness. It was a quiet storm of thoughts. The weight of success and isolation had become his daily burden. At 38, Michael was the CEO of Owolabi Technologies, a powerful tech company that had made its mark in Africa. Yet, in the high-rise office, surrounded by polished floors and glass windows, he felt the emptiness of loneliness. His past, marked by his mother's untimely death and abandonment by his father, was something he couldn't shake. Despite the vast empire he'd built, he had yet to forgive himself for the unresolved grief of being left behind. The phone rang, snapping him from his reverie. "Michael," his assistant Deborah's voice quivered, "there's a little girl here. She says she needs to see you. She insists." His brow furrowed. "Send her in." When the door opened, Michael felt his breath hitch. A young girl, no older than 7, stood by the window. Her faded red dress and worn sandals seemed out of place in the gleaming office, yet it was the birthmark on her shoulder that stopped him. It was the same crescent-shaped mark he had carried since childhood. "Who are you?" His voice was barely a whisper, but the question carried the weight of years of unanswered doubt. The girl turned to face him. "I'm Chioma. My mother said I should come see you." The air seemed to still. He couldn't breathe. The realization hit like a tidal wave. He and this girl shared a connection he had never known existed. Before now, Michael's life was not always this way. Growing up in the cramped and noisy slums of Lagos, he had learned early that survival was a game of endurance. His mother, a single parent, had done everything she could to keep him safe and fed. The roof above their heads was a patched-together mess, and often, there was nothing to eat but the smell of cooking oil from the neighbors' kitchens. But despite the harshness, his mother's smile had been his source of hope. She would always say, "One day, my son, you will be better than all of this. You will rise." Her words stayed with him even as he lost her to a long illness. He was just a teenager when she passed, leaving him to navigate the world without the person who had given him everything. The pain of her loss left a permanent scar. But he did what she had always asked him to do. He rose. He poured everything into his studies, his work, and, eventually, his company. But in all that success, he remained a man shaped by the void of that loss. He hadn't learned how to heal, he had only learned how to succeed. It was at the hospital, of all places, where Michael first met Ruth. He had gone to oversee a charitable donation of equipment, but it was Ruth, the nurse, who caught his attention. In a small, dimly lit room, she was tending to a terminally ill patient. The light from the overhead bulb caught her face, softening the harshness of the world outside. Ruth was everything he wasn't. She wasn't driven by money, nor the need to prove herself. She was grounded, kind, and full of life. They struck up a conversation, and Michael found himself captivated by her warmth. She spoke of her childhood struggles, how she had worked her way through school, how she had never known her father, how her mother's untimely death had made her strong yet vulnerable. Ruth didn't try to shield him from the tough realities of life. Instead, she showed him that beauty existed even in the midst of pain. For the first time in years, Michael felt something stir in his chest. He hadn't realized how empty he'd been until Ruth's kindness filled that space. But with the connection came fear. What if she was just like the others? What if he let his guard down, only to be hurt again? Their relationship blossomed gently, like a flower in a barren field. Ruth and Michael would meet often, talking about their childhoods, their dreams, and the small joys in life. Michael would visit her at the hospital, bringing her flowers, a gesture he had never done for anyone before. They were slow, tender moments that didn't scream for attention but built a quiet, beautiful connection between them. But as their bond deepened, so did the warnings. Deborah, his longtime assistant, had been with him through it all, through the loneliness, the victories, and the betrayals. She had seen Michael's guarded nature, and she sensed that Ruth was not entirely who she appeared to be. "Be careful, Michael," Deborah warned one evening, her voice calm but tinged with concern. "People like Ruth, they come into your life and they take without you even knowing." Michael's temper flared, but deep down he knew that Deborah's words weren't entirely unfounded. Ruth came from a world different from his, one of modesty, not wealth. Could he truly trust her, or was he simply allowing himself to fall for someone who would inevitably hurt him? It all came crashing down one Tuesday morning. Michael had just returned from an international business trip, his mind filled with strategies and decisions. He was excited to see Ruth, but when he overheard a conversation she had with a man, a business rival of his, everything changed. He overheard her admit that her affection for him had always been a means to an end. She had been using him, slowly positioning herself to gain access to his company, to exploit his resources for her own goals. The betrayal was a gut punch. His body trembled as the weight of her words crashed into him. He wasn't angry, he was devastated. He had allowed himself to trust her, to believe that someone could truly care for him, only to learn that it was all a lie. His hands shook as he walked into the room, where Ruth stood, unaware of the storm approaching. "Why, Ruth?" His voice was quiet, almost broken. "Why did you do this to me?" Ruth's face faltered. She had no defense. "Michael, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen this way." But it didn't matter. The damage had been done. The betrayal, sharp and unyielding, cut deeper than he could have imagined. The pain was raw, but Michael didn't crumble. Instead, he retreated into the mechanics of his work. The next few weeks were spent in cold, calculated silence. He began to plan his next move, his revenge. He started maneuvering his business strategy, shifting assets, securing key legal documents, and ensuring that his competitors would pay the price for their dishonesty. Deborah, sensing his shift in mood, became his silent ally, offering practical support while staying away from the emotional fallout. She knew Michael's vengeance wasn't just about business, it was personal. Michael's victory wasn't loud or grand, it was quiet, meticulous, and powerful. He wouldn't let anyone take away his dignity. The final showdown took place in the boardroom, under the sterile glow of fluorescent lights. Ruth's ally, one of Michael's old rivals,